One of the things that everybody seems to know about World War II is the Holocaust, which was a part, obviously, of Hitler's plan to take care of undesirable populations from the area that Germany was taking over. The group that we think about most closely associated with this are the Jewish people. But there's some other groups that we'll take a look at as we go through. I've got a couple of great documentaries that I will um, tag for you on the playlist if this is something that you're a little more interested in. I know this is something obviously you hit in like the eighth grade with Anne Frank. And some of those deals, but again, it's just too important a part of history not to spend a little time taking a look at. In the film library, I've got a couple of great films that deal with this. Um, Probably the most famous is Schindler's List, which is a really good true story of the Holocaust. I've also got Jacob the Liar, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, um, some different things there. So if that's something you're interested in, come see me and I'll get you hooked up. Um, the idea of Holocaust is it's a mass killing. These are civilians, um, and like I said, specifically, it's going to target Jewish populations of these countries that Hitler is taking over during World War II. It was part of what Hitler called the final solution to the Jewish problem. It doesn't actually start out as this idea of mass extermination, but it moves there very quickly. Hitler, in his book Mein Kampf, had taken to blaming the Jews for Germany's loss in World War One. And Jews were in a minority in every country where they were at. There was no Jewish homeland. That won't happen until Israel after the war. And so it was easy for that particular group of people to be picked on. And there are really famous stories about that throughout history. One of my favorite musicals is one called Fiddler on the Roof, and it deals with some of those issues. Um, these are some of the names that you see given to the Holocaust. The last one, the idea of genocide, is one that we hear about a lot today. It's trying to exterminate a particular group of people. That word comes about in World War II. Because of these actions. If you remember back to middle school and watching Hotel Rwanda, that's another example of genocide. So this is still something that happens around the world today. It's something that usually the governments of the world will try actively to prevent groups from trying to do this to one another, but it's something you always kind of got to be on the guard against. A lot of this starts in 1935 with a set of laws called the Nuremberg Laws. Nuremberg was an ancient capital of Germany, and we're going to see it plays a role in um, the trials of these people that perpetrated things like the Holocaust after the war. But Nuremberg was also the site of the first really big Nazi rally. Where you could see that political movement starting to pick up steam. So the Nuremberg Laws get passed in 1935, and they're what are called anti-Semitic laws. Anti-Semitic is anti-Jewish. So anytime you see anti-Semitic, that's what that means. And it does a couple of things. It classifies who is a German citizen, and it says that Jews cannot be German citizens. It's kind of the same thing as we see in the South. There was a certain percentage um, that you had to be Jewish in order to be considered legally Jewish. So it wasn't just people that practiced the religion. This is an ethnic group. So if you had a parent or a great grandparent who was Jewish, even if you didn't consider yourself part of that religion, you were still considered to be Jewish. The Nuremberg Laws also prohibit Germans from having romantic relationships or marriages to Jews. And so, because they're not considered citizens, then there are certain rights that those Jewish people aren't aren't allowed to have. And so even before the mass killing starts, we start to see a movement in the 1930s to limit the rights of these people in Germany. So who gets targeted, right? So there's a whole bunch of groups. Jews, obviously, and the yellow star is what eventually they will be forced to wear on their clothing and paint on like the windows and doors of their businesses, so people know that they're talking to or doing business with somebody who is Jewish. Homosexuals were included in this group. Gypsies. Lots of different countries in Europe have gypsies, but it's just kind of a nomadic people. Probably the closest, if you've ever seen the Disney cartoon, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Um, the group of people there are gypsies, people who were physically or mentally disabled, and then anybody that politically was disagreeing with what the Nazis were trying to do. And so those were all groups who could be targeted for persecution. You see here the stars that the children are wearing. You've got the triangles that homosexuals would be forced to wear. And so every group had kind of a little different identifying marker that they would have to wear. Um, Kristallnacht is really the first time we see direct violence against the Jewish people by just a large group of folks doing this out in the open. November of 1938, there's controversy around what starts it. Basically, there was a German official who's murdered in France, and they blame people. Germany blame the Nazis blame the Jews, and then go out and break the windows in synagogues and in businesses. They burn down Jewish homes and businesses. They attack. There are Jewish men and women who are killed during this, and it is seen by everyone as being an escalation of the violence. Not only is it enough you're stripping these people of citizenship, but now there's direct violence from government-supported groups that are going on. And it's, for a lot of people, this is an eye-opener. This goes from being just an idea to something that is more in your face, because now you've got evidence of these armed mobs who are going out and taking direct action, being violent, and so it almost puts it into another category of behavior. In 1933, they had started to build what they called concentration camps, and originally it was just for um, people who disagreed very, very vociferously politically, or with people from foreign countries like POWs, things like that, that were going to be put into these places. But in 1938, they become work camps. So what happens is the Jewish people were originally removed from their homes and sent to ghettos, like sections of a city where they were allowed to live. And then once those ghettos were cleaned out, these people were sent to work camps. And basically, the idea is they were going to be slave labor. They were going to go out and work in war industry factories, or work directly for the war effort, doing manual types of labor that were going to happen. Uh, Horrible, horrible conditions. Sanitation was poor. Nutrition was almost non-existent. People are just shoved into these barracks and given very little personal space or place to sleep. That sort of thing that would be there. This picture is of Auschwitz, which is the most famous of these camps, and the sign above says in German, "Work will make you free." Uh, but like I said, this is just this uh, mass gathering of these folks. It's only just one more step to take them from work camps to the death camps that would follow. Um, Hitler had worked on a couple of other ideas before it had gotten to to this particular point. One was the idea of deportation. He wanted to round up the Jews in these places and send them to other places. But places that he checked, like the United States, there were people who were anti-Semitic here, and said, "No, we don't want these people coming in either," and so kind of cut off those routes. Um, One of our future presidents, a guy named Lyndon Johnson, actually secretly organized a group of Jews that came over to live in Texas. But he did it kind of under the radar to try and and was able to save some folks that were doing there. But there weren't a lot of countries who were lining up to do this. Hitler toyed with the idea of permanent ghettos, just kind of permanent places in the city where these Jewish people would be staying. In 1940, there's evidence of what's called the Madagascar Plan. Madagascar is the island that you see there off of the east coast of Africa. The idea was just take all the Jews and put them onto Madagascar. But eventually, by 1942, they are using Zyklon B and methods of mass killing and then burning the bodies of these people in order to get rid of them. So what would happen is they were brought in usually on train cars, just kind of packed in there from these ghettos, as much, packing as many people as they could in there. They get out, they're stripped of their clothing, they would shave their heads, a lot of times using the hair to stuff like pillows and things like that. And then they're sorted. And so the people that were able to work were put into one line. The people that weren't were sent directly to the gas chambers and then eventually the incinerators. People that, like I said, were a little stronger could work, or there were Nazi scientists who would experiment on these people, doing just kind of terrible things to them that way. Um, this is the top is a gas chamber. It's supposed to look like a shower room to keep the panic down as people were coming in. But they'd bring these people in, drop this gas in, usually Zyklon B, and then it would, um, after a few minutes, everybody's dead, and then they would take them to the crematoriums that you see below there to burn the bodies. Um, there were Nazi doctors who experimented on the prisoners. Got um, some examples here for you of some of the experiments. You hear a lot about twin studies. They would torture one of the twins and then measure the body responses of the other twin to see if there was any kind of connection between the two. They would test, vaccinations or poisons, things like that, on these particular folks. Probably the most infamous name of this is Joseph Mingle. He was a doctor at Auschwitz. He actually flees to South America after um, after the war's over with, and lives out his life in Argentina as they try and hunt him down. Great book called "Killing the SS" by Bill O'Reilly. That one part of it is the search, them trying to find Joseph Mingle and bring him to justice. Um, the statistics: 11 million people. Right, we know there's 6 million Jews, but almost that many again of those other groups that I was mentioning before. There are less than 4 million Jews that survived the Holocaust. 9 out of every 10 Jewish persons in Poland was killed. 1/3 of all German Jews, and 63% of all European Jews. So Hitler got really close to doing what he was wanting to do, and it's a terrible, terrible legacy to see being left. The problem is, in World War II, really the question was, well, what can we do about it? There's evidence that FDR knew by 1942 that these killing camps were going on, but it was very deep inside Nazi-held territory, and so for him, kind of the way to bring it all to an end was to win the war. You see famous stories of folks, if you watch Band of Brothers, the Band of Brothers going into um, a death camp and not really knowing what they were seeing, but seeing these things for the first time. George Patton, right? His military guys find one as they're getting into Germany, um, and so you just people are stunned just at the cruelty, the horror of what's being done to these folks in the death camps. And so we've actually got here in the United States a museum that is dedicated to Holocaust remembrance in Washington D.C. It's a very interesting place to go and check out. I encourage you if you have a chance to do that. You kind of go in. There's 3 floors, and it takes you up to the top floor at the beginning, and then as you walk down, it traces kind of the path that the Holocaust took. It's just a very moving place. Got a great video I'm going to put up for you on the playlist talking about Ray Allen, who is a famous NBA basketball player, played for the Celtics and the Miami Heat, probably if you remember him there, and just his kind of discovery of the museum and of his passion for communicating that to other people, leading him to share it with his teammates and things like that. And so I'll put that up on the playlist for you as well. Like I said, 1945 to the end of World War II, as the Allies find these camps, they start to liberate them. The problem is for a lot of these folks, especially if it's the Soviets weren't much nicer to groups that they found to be undesirable, including the Jews and political enemies, than than the Nazis were. And so that wasn't a great situation to find yourself in. As these people are um, as these people are liberated, though, one of the problems is you can see from the picture they're very malnourished. GIs that would try and give them food from their packs actually found themselves doing more harm than good because their bodies just couldn't handle nutrition after being starved for such a long period of time. And like I said, just it's almost unbelievable that human beings could be this cruel to one another. And so, uh, want to encourage you just to kind of spend some time going through some of those things there. Just because I think learning about this stuff, it's important to know that it happened so that it never happens again. So that we all kind of have this shared sense that we have to be on our guard because we don't want things like this going on in the world we live in.